All right, let's get into it. Today, we are tackling a big one, grounded theory. You've seen that term pop up in tons of research papers, but what does it actually mean? Well, we're going to figure that out by first looking at what it isn't, all based on a really sharp editorial by Roy Suddaby.
Come on, you know the feeling. You're reading a study, you get to the method section, and boom, there it is. We used a grounded theory approach. And you probably just nod and keep reading, right? I mean, it sounds super official, super rigorous. But what are they actually doing?
Well, here's the kicker. You're not the only one who's a little fuzzy on the details. Turns out a lot of researchers who claim to use grounded theory might be misinterpreting it themselves. So to really get to the heart of what it is, we're going to start by busting some of the most common myths out there.
And listen, this isn't just some small academic quibble. Suddaby calls it a rhetorical sleight of hand. That's pretty serious. It basically means the term is sometimes just slapped on a paper to make it sound legit, without the researcher actually doing the hard work behind the method. So let's make sure we know what that work actually is.
Okay, so before we can start debunking myths, we need to be on the same page. What is grounded theory, really?
At its core, it's a method for building theory from the ground up. That's where the name grounded comes from. Glaser and Strauss came up with it because they were tired of researchers trying to shoehorn real-world social stuff into these huge pre-existing theories. Instead, the whole point is to understand the world as people actually experience it and build a theory that explains their reality. And these two ideas right here, they're what make grounded theory so different. You see, in traditional research, you usually collect all your data first, and then you analyze it. But here, you're doing both at the exact same time. It's this living, breathing process. An insight you get from one interview literally tells you who you need to interview next. The theory that's starting to form actually guides where you go.
All right, let's dive into myth number 1. This is a huge one. The idea that to do proper grounded theory, you have to walk in with a totally empty brain, a complete blank slate.
So the myth says you have to avoid reading anything on your topic so you can have these pure, fresh insights. But the reality is so much smarter than that. Of course you have to know what's already been studied. The goal isn't to be ignorant, it's to stop yourself from being locked into a hypothesis-testing box. You want to stay open to what the data is telling you, not just look for evidence to prove an old idea.
And I love this quote from Ronald Coase because it just nails the danger of going in totally blind. If you ignore everything that came before, you don't get some brilliant new theory. You just get a big, random pile of data that's not good for much of anything. Okay, on to our second myth. This is the idea that a grounded theorist's job is basically to just collect a ton of really great interview quotes and then, well, just show them to everyone.
And you can see why people fall for this, right? You get these powerful, authentic quotes, and you think, my work here is done. But that's not grounded theory. That's just description. The whole point, the hard work, is to take that raw data and lift it up to a higher, more abstract level. You're not making a scrapbook, you're building a theory.
Now, Suddaby points out a few reasons this mistake happens. Sometimes researchers mix up grounded theory with something like phenomenology, which is more focused on just describing an experience. Other times, they just don't do the heavy lifting of analysis. And a big one is stopping too soon, before they hit category saturation. That's the point where new interviews aren't really telling you anything new, which is your signal that your concepts are solid.
Let's talk about a really big one. Myth number 3. You can use grounded theory to test a hypothesis you already have.
This one is a total misunderstanding of what grounded theory is for. It is a tool for discovery, not for verification. Trying to use its techniques to prove something you already believe, that's what Suddaby calls methodological slurring. You're just mashing together two totally different ways of thinking about research. It doesn't work.
And this table here just lays it out so clearly. You can see the deep philosophical divide. Grounded theory wants to understand how we create our reality. Hypothesis testing wants to find truths about a reality it sees as external and objective. One builds theory up from the data, that's inductive. The other tests theory down with data, that's deductive. They are fundamentally different tools for fundamentally different jobs.
But here's where it gets tricky. Even when researchers do it right, academic journals often force them to write it up in a neat, linear way. This quote is a perfect example of an author trying to signal what really happened. They're basically saying, hey, just so you know, I'm presenting the finished theory first to make this easier to read. But remember, this all came out of a long, messy discovery process.
And that messy process leads us right into our final myth for today, the idea that grounded theory is just some simple follow-the-steps recipe.
So many people fall into this trap. They think if I just get the right software and follow the 3-step coding guide, a brilliant theory will just pop out. But that completely misses the soul of the method. The software can help you stay organized, sure, but it can't give you the aha moment. This is an interpretive craft, and the single most important tool is the researcher's own creative, analytical mind.
And you don't have to take my word for it. This is from Strauss himself, one of the founders. He's making it absolutely clear. The method is just a framework. It can't guarantee a creative outcome. The quality of the final theory comes down to the researcher's own skill, their own ability to dance with the data. So what does it take? Well, instead of a simple formula, you need some serious skills. You need theoretical sensitivity. That's the ability to see the deeper patterns in the data. You need a massive tolerance for ambiguity because this process is not neat and tidy. And, of course, you need a whole lot of patience and creativity. This is a craft you have to develop, not just a procedure you follow.
So after all that, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, wow, this sounds really hard. If it's not a simple recipe, why on earth would anyone bother with all this trouble?
And this right here is the answer. This is the whole point. We do it because it's one of the best tools we have for creating genuinely new ideas. It allows us to build theories that are deeply, authentically connected to how people actually live their lives, helping us understand not just what we do, but the rich, complex, and fascinating ways we make sense of our world.